the crime itself was anything like, oh my goodness, but it's all the other stuff that's around it that was very interesting to me. So give me a little premise of, because I've read the book, but, tell us a little bit about, from your eyes, the crime at its crux, and then maybe a little bit of the gender bias and sensationalism that was kind of wrapped around that time.
Yeah, so the crime itself was a home invasion robbery. What was stunning about it was in this very quiet residential neighborhood in Burbank, known to be very safe, very family friendly, the kind of place where you'd let your kids play in the front lawn, and we're talking 1950s anyway. But by 1950s standards, it was very much what you'd see on television, very crime-free, very peaceful, very quiet. But the woman who lived in this house, Mabel Monahan, was a really trippy lady who had been on the vaudeville circuit. She had married her husband, who was also on the vaudeville circuit. They were a dynamic duo, roller skating champs that performed all over the country. And her daughter had married a man named Tudor Scherer, who was a casino entrepreneur who started out in Los Angeles and selling booze at a speakeasy that he formed at a place called Ships, that was a converted ship moored off Santa Monica Pier, and then also tried to run gambling. But Mickey Cohen, the notorious gambler, was owning the gambling business in Los Angeles, and Tudor Scherer decided he would like to stay alive, so decided to open his own place in Las Vegas and became a very successful entrepreneur. He married Mabel's daughter. They ultimately got divorced, and in the settlement, he gave Iris, his daughter, this house in Burbank, this little ranch house in this quiet neighborhood, and Iris gave it to Mabel. So Mabel was living there, but she remained friendly with Tudor Scherer, and he would visit her periodically whenever he came into town. And so the criminal community in Los Angeles, started a rumor that Tudor Scherer was skimming money off his casino operations in Las Vegas and storing them with Mabel. And the rumor built to the point where there was reputedly this safe with hundreds of thousands of dollars. And so they were scheming all along for a couple years about how to knock that place over. They finally did, because they found someone who could get Mabel, who was notoriously security conscious, to open the door. That is Barbara Graham.
Yep.
Petite, beautiful, young. She would go to the door, say, my car broke down, could I please use your phone? Mabel, seeing this woman who seemed non-threatening, opened the door, and 4 men stepped in behind her. Mabel was ultimately found strangled and bludgeoned to death in the house that was found torn up, furniture upended, carpets ripped out, and, just everything, just totally ransacked and trashed. And, in fact, even went through her closet and upended all of her purses with the exception of one purse.
Right.
And that was left hanging on the hook.
Yep. I think that's fascinating, right? Had a lot of stuff in it.
Yeah. It had jewelry, very expensive jewelry, platinum diamonds, and hundreds of dollars in cash. That they left. So the cops at first were like, they had no witnesses, no eyewitnesses, no ear witnesses. They found no fingerprints. They found nothing to go on. And then with all that money still left in the house, they didn't even know why it had happened. So at first, of course, they went after Tudor Scherer thinking there was a connection there, but there wasn't.
Right.
So that's the crime.
Right. And I think the crime in and of itself is not like, oh my God, this is just so interesting, fascinating, the plan. And no, it's just so much more interesting to me while they came to the decision that they came to ultimately as to who was committing the crime and how that all kind of went through. So I think one of the things that I also found interesting is back during that time, most women were somewhat subservient, right? Would be all dressed up, have a nice martini in their hand for their husband that comes home, all prim and perfect. Barbara was not like that. And so I started to wonder and listen to a lot of the different, the story during your book, wondering like, well, how much did that kind of go against her? Is that people are seeing her as almost like, not the norm? And are those sorts of biases inherent when I guess you are actually trying a case?
Yeah, so Barbara had a very rough upbringing. She was basically abandoned by her mother at birth, who kept throwing her out of the house, sending her to strangers basically from the time she was born, family when she could, but strangers when she couldn't find, a place to park Barbara, and then had 2 other children. Barbara never knew her father, neither did her siblings, but there didn't seem to be any real connection between her and her siblings. They got to stay home. Barbara kept getting thrown out. She never got past the 8th grade. She was wound up in a reform school that was basically a dungeon torture chamber for girls. It was hideous and had been written up a number of times for draconian methods of discipline that came down to waterboarding and torture. So she had a very rough life where she lived on the fringes, never really developed skills, but yet she was very smart and inherently someone who was cultured. She loved jazz music. She loved Omar Khayyam, read the Rubaiyat, loved poetry, loved classical music. It was an amazing and sad thing that she had so much to offer and so much to give, but no one who cared. And so she lived on the fringes, which meant that she amassed a kind of rap that the people on the fringes do, all misdemeanor, nonviolent stuff. Shoplifting, check kiting, a little bit of prostitution here and there, minor drugs, that sort of thing, but no violence in her background at all.
Right.
She became friendly with Emmett Perkins, who ran a gambling house, and she became his dice girl, so to speak, which was a shill. She would get men to part with their money. But, her life, she could not have survived the life she had she not become kind of tough and strong, and somebody who was not going to suffer fools gladly. As a result, she did not conform to the subservient, meek, kind of yes dear woman that was held to be.
I don't think you and I would either. I don't think I'd like that very much.
No, but that's okay today, largely okay, although, sometimes I wonder. But it's certainly more okay today than it was then.
Well, yeah. And one of the things that really struck a nerve with me is that you brought up something so fascinating that I don't think about, but it's so true. A case is not just a case. There are societal, cultural winds, political winds that surround that case that do have an impact.